shook her head vigorously and made two not-to-be-rendered sounds that meant, "No, indeed." "Well, if this were your sweetheart, you'd take hold of him, wouldn't you?" Again she gave a vigorous shake of the head. "Well, if he saw you riding behind me, he wouldn't like it, would he?" She didn't care, she said, but Hale did, and when he heard the galloping of horses behind him, saw two men coming, and heard one of them shouting, "Hey, you man on that yaller mule, stop there!" he shifted his revolver, pulled in, and waited with some uneasiness. They came up, reeling in their saddles. Neither one the girl's sweetheart, as he saw at once from her face, and began to ask what the girl characterized afterward as unnecessary questions: who he was, and who she was, and where they were going. Hale answered so shortly that the girl thought there was going to be a fight, and she was on the point of slipping from the mule. "Sit still," said Hale quietly. "There is not going to be a fight so long as you are here." "There ain't," said one of the men. "Well," then he looked sharply at the girl and turned his horse. "Come on, Bill, that's old Dave Tolliver's gal." The girl's face was on fire. "Them mean Falins," she said contemptuously, and somehow the mere fact that Hale had been even for the moment antagonistic to the other faction seemed to put him in the girl's mind at once on her side, and straightway she talked freely of the feud. Devil Judd had taken no active part in it for a long time, she said, except to keep it down, especially since he and her father had had a falling out, and the two families did not visit much, though she and her cousin June sometimes spent the night with each other. "You won't be able to get over there till long after dark," she said, and she caught her breath so suddenly and so sharply that Hale turned to see what the matter was. She searched his face with her black eyes, which were like June's without the depths of June's. "I was just wondering if maybe you wasn't the same feller that was over in Lonesome last fall." "Maybe I am. My name's Hale." The girl laughed. "Well, if this ain't the beatin'est! I've heard June talk about you. My brother Dave don't like you overmuch," she added frankly. "I reckon we'll see Dave purty soon. If this ain't the beatin'est!" she repeated, and she laughed again, as she always did laugh, it seemed to Hale, when there was any prospect of getting him into trouble. "You can't get over there till long after dark," she said again presently. "Is there any place on the way where I can get to stay all night?" "You can stay all night with the Red Fox on top of the mountain." "The Red Fox," repeated Hale. "Yes, he lives right on top of the mountain. You can't miss his house." "Oh, yes, I remember him. I saw him talking to one of the Falins in town today, behind the barn when I went to get my horse." "You seed him a-talkin' to a Falin afore the trouble came up?" the girl asked slowly and with such significance that Hale turned to look at her. He felt straightway that he ought not to have said that, and the day was to come when he would remember it to his cost. He knew how foolish it was for the stranger to show sympathy with or interest in one faction or another in a mountain feud, but to give any kind of information of one to the other, that was unwise indeed. Ahead of them now a little stream ran from a ravine across the road. Beyond was a cabin. In the doorway were several faces, and sitting on a horse at the gate was young Dave Tolliver. "Well, I get down here," said the girl, and before his mule stopped she slid from behind him and made for the gate without a word of thanks or goodbye. "Howdy," said Hale, taking in the group with his glance, but leaving his eyes on young Dave. The rest nodded, but the boy was too surprised for speech, and the spirit of deviltry took the girl when she saw her brother's face, and at the gate she turned. "Much obleeged," she said. "Tell June I'm a-comin' over to see her next Sunday." "I will," said Hale, and he rode on. To his surprise, when he had gone 100 yards, he heard the boy spurring after him, and he looked around inquiringly as young Dave drew alongside. But the boy said nothing, and Hale, amused, kept still, wondering when the lad would open speech. At the mouth of another little creek, the boy stopped his horse as though he was to turn up that way. "You come back again," he said, searching Hale's face with his black eyes. "Yes," said Hale, "I've come back. You goin' over to Lonesome Cove?" "Yes." The boy hesitated, and a sudden change of mind was plain to Hale in his face. "I wish you'd tell Uncle Judd about the trouble in town today," he said, looking fixedly at Hale. "Certainly." "Did you tell the Red Fox that day you seed him when you was goin' over to the Gap last fall that you seed me at Uncle Judd's?" "No," said Hale. "But how did you know that I saw the Red Fox that day?" The boy laughed unpleasantly. "So long," he said. "See you again some day." The way was steep, the sun was down, and darkness gathering before Hale reached the top of the mountain. So he hallooed at the yard fence of the Red Fox, who peered cautiously out of the door, and asked his name before he came to the gate. and there, with a grin on his curious mismatched face, he repeated young Dave's words. "You come back again." And Hale repeated his, "Yes, I've come back. You going over to Lonesome Cove?" "Yes," said Hale impatiently, "I'm going over to Lonesome Cove. Can I stay here all night?" "Shore," said the old man hospitably. "That's a fine hoss you got there," he added with a chuckle. "Been swappin'?" Hale had to laugh as he climbed down from the bony, ear-flopping beast. "I left my horse in town. He's lame." "Yes, I seed you thar." Hale could not resist. "Yes, and I seed you." The old man almost turned. "Whar?" Again the temptation was too great. "Talkin' to the Falin who started the row." This time the Red Fox wheeled sharply and his pale blue eyes filled with suspicion. "I keeps friends with both sides," he said. "Ain't many folks can do that." "I reckon not," said Hale calmly, but in the pale eyes he still saw suspicion. When they entered the cabin a little old woman in black, dumb and noiseless, was cooking supper. The children of the two, he learned, had scattered, and they lived there alone. On the mantel were two pistols, and in one corner was the big Winchester he remembered, and behind it was the big brass telescope. On the table was a Bible and a volume of Swedenborg, and among the usual strings of pepper pods and beans and twisted long green tobacco were drying herbs and roots of all kinds, and about the fireplace were bottles of liquids that had been stewed from them. The little old woman served, and opened her lips not at all. Supper was eaten with no further reference to the doings in town that day, and no word was said about their meeting when Hale first went to Lonesome Cove until they were smoking on the porch. "I heerd you found some mighty fine coal over in Lonesome Cove." "Yes." "Young Dave Tolliver thinks you found something else thar, too," chuckled the Red Fox. "I did," said Hale coolly, and the old man chuckled again. "She's a purty little gal, sure." "Who is?" asked Hale, looking calmly at his questioner, and the Red Fox lapsed into baffled silence. The moon was brilliant and the night was still. Suddenly the Red Fox cocked his ear like a hound and, without a word, slipped swiftly within the cabin. A moment later Hale heard the galloping of a horse, and from out the dark woods loped a horseman with a Winchester across his saddle bow. He pulled in at the gate, but before he could shout "Hello," the Red Fox had stepped from the porch into the moonlight and was going to meet him. Hale had never seen a more easy, graceful, daring figure on horseback, and in the bright light he could make out the reckless face of the man who had been the first to flash his pistols in town that day, Bad Rufe Tolliver. For 10 minutes the two talked in whispers. Rufe bent forward with one elbow on the withers of his horse, but lifting his eyes every now and then to the stranger seated in the porch. And then the horseman turned with an oath and galloped into the darkness whence he came, while Red Fox slouched back to the porch and dropped silently into his seat. "Who was that?" asked Hale. "Bad Rufe Tolliver." "I've heard of him. Most everybody in these mountains has. He's the feller that's always causing trouble. Him and Joe Falin agreed to go west last fall to end the war. And now Rufe claims Joe don't count now, and he's got the right to come back. Soon as he comes back, things get frolicsome again. He swore he wouldn't go back unless another Falin goes too. Wirt Falin agreed, and that's how they made peace today. Now Rufe says he won't go at all, truce or no truce. My wife and thar's a Tolliver, but both sides comes to me and I keeps peace with both of 'em." No doubt he did, Hale thought, keep peace or mischief with or against anybody with that face of his. That was a common type of a bad man, that horseman who had galloped away from the gate. But this old man with his dual face, who preached the word on Sundays and on other days was a walking arsenal, who dreamed dreams and had visions and slipped through the hills in his mysterious moccasins, on errands of mercy or chasing men from vanity, personal enmity, or for fun, and still appeared so sane, he was a type that confounded. No wonder, for these reasons, and as tribute to his infernal shrewdness, he was known far and wide as the Red Fox of the mountains. But Hale was too tired for further speculation, and presently he yawned. "Want to lay down?" asked the old man quickly. "I think I do," said Hale, and they went inside. The old man had her face to the wall and the bed in one corner, and the Red Fox pointed to a bed in the other. "Thar's your bed." Again Hale's eyes fell on the big Winchester. "Want to lay down?" asked the old man quickly. "I think I do," said Hale, and they went inside. The little old woman had her face to the wall and a bed in one corner, and the Red Fox pointed to a bed in the other. "Thar's your bed." Again Hale's eyes fell on the big Winchester. "I reckon there ain't more'n 2 others like it in all these mountains." "What's the caliber?" "Biggest made," was the answer, "a 50 by 75. "Centerfire?" "Rim," said the Red Fox. "Gracious," laughed Hale, "what do you want such a big one for?" "Man cannot live by bread alone in these mountains," said the Red Fox grimly.